As Lena and Professor Ryan's love story unfolds, we can't help but wonder, have you ever experienced a moment like theirs? Let us know where you're watching from in the comments below. We love seeing our story travel across the world. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell so you won't miss tomorrow's special episode. A twist you won't see coming is just around the corner. Your support means the world to us, and every comment brings this story to life. See you in the next chapter of Love and Surprises. Lena was a 28-year-old comic book artist living in Portland, Oregon. She had been in the industry for almost a decade, known for her bold lines and imaginative worlds, but when it came to drawing romance, something always fell flat. Her editor constantly reminded her that her love stories lacked emotion, chemistry, or spark. Frustrated and desperate for inspiration, Lena decided to take a walk through Central Park during her short trip to New York, hoping that a change of scenery might breathe life into her next project. Sketchbook in hand, she wandered through the park, soaking in the sights, the blooming cherry blossoms, the kids playing frisbee, the sound of street performers echoing through the air. Just as she sat down on a bench to begin sketching, a golden retriever came barreling towards her out of nowhere. Barking and wagging its tail, the dog seemed fixated on her. Lena looked around but didn't see anyone nearby. Was the dog lost? Injured? She knelt down and asked softly, "Hey there, are you looking for someone?" The dog barked again and took a few steps forward, looking back at her as if asking her to follow. Without thinking twice, Lena followed the dog, who led her down a winding path to a quiet riverside bridge. That's when she saw him. A tall man, broad-shouldered, stylish, in a casual button-down with messy dark hair and a soft gaze, stood there scanning the area anxiously. The moment their eyes met, time seemed to pause. He rushed over, thanked her for helping his dog, and reached out for the leash she was holding. Their hands brushed. It was a small touch, but enough to send a jolt through her. Before she could find the words to introduce herself, a butterfly fluttered by and the dog leapt toward it. The leash tangled around their legs, and in a clumsy swirl of limbs, Lena and the stranger fell to the ground. Their faces were just inches apart, and then, in one split second, his lips accidentally brushed against hers. It wasn't a kiss, of intention, but it happened and it changed everything. Flustered, the man quickly stood up and apologized. I didn't mean to. That was, completely unintentional," he stammered. Then he looked her in the eyes and smiled. "To make it up to you, I owe you one wish, anything you want." Before she could answer, Lena's phone rang. It was her editor urging her to return to the office. She told the man to wait for her, promising she'd be back in an hour. But in the rush, she didn't get his name, nor give hers. She ran off, heart racing, face flushed, mind spinning. She didn't know it yet, but that accidental kiss would become the spark behind the most passionate love story she'd ever write, and maybe, just maybe, the one she'd get to live. Lena couldn't stop thinking about that kiss. It haunted her all the way back to her office in Midtown. His voice, his smile, the way he'd said, "I owe you one wish." But what gnawed at her most was that she had left without getting his name, or giving hers. She'd told him to wait for an hour. 1 hour. But by the time she returned to that riverside bridge, he was gone. What she didn't know was, he had waited. The man, whose name she would later learn was Ryan, had sat there for hours. Eventually, he scribbled his name and number on a piece of paper, left it on the bench, and walked away with his dog. Lena never saw the note. Back at home, restless and full of regret, she turned to the internet, posting a message in a local forum. "Looking for a man with a golden retriever. We met by the riverside near Central Park. If you see this, I owe you a story." The post went viral. Within hours, someone replied, "I've seen him around Westwood University, architecture department." The next morning, Lena was there. She wandered the campus, heart pounding, asking students if they knew a tall, dark-haired professor with a golden retriever. That's when someone pointed toward the lecture hall and said, "You're probably looking for Professor Ryan. He's kind of a legend here." Lena slipped inside, just in time to see him begin class. He was standing at the front, holding up a Rubik's Cube. "Anyone who solves this," he said with a confident smirk, Gets a wish granted. Her heart skipped. One by one, students came up and failed. Then Lena, quietly, confidently, solved. The cube in seconds. His eyes widened. "You again?" he said, stunned. But to her surprise, he didn't remember her name. That's when she learned the truth. Professor Ryan had a rare memory condition. He couldn't remember people's names, not even those he saw daily. He used a facial recognition app on his phone just to get by. Still, he honored his word. "If I can remember your name in 7 days," he told her, "you'll be my teaching assistant." Challenge accepted. What followed was chaos. Lena printed her name on a t-shirt. She labeled his coffee mug, his keyboard, his lunchbox. She even held up flashcards from under his lecture table. One night she dreamed he kissed her again, asking why her name had a broken heart idiom in it. She woke up flustered but inspired. The next day, she wore a neon name tag. When he ignored it, she scrawled her name on his bagel wrapper, then his teacup, then his whiteboard. He still called her Wendy. She was furious, but she didn't give up. Even the janitor loved her. "Professor," she said, "that girl's trying hard. Give her a chance." Rain poured down one evening. Ryan grabbed his umbrella and left campus. She ran after him, slipping in the puddles, soaked but determined. "I don't care if you forget my name," she yelled. "Just remember me." For a second, he froze. That was the moment it all started to change. For the next few days, Lena gave it everything she had. From printing her name on sticky notes to hacking the university's coffee machine to display Lena's brew, she made sure Professor Ryan saw her name everywhere. She was exhausted, but determined. Somewhere along the way, she wasn't just doing it for the assistant job anymore. She was doing it for him, and maybe a little for herself. The rain didn't stop. It poured for 3 days straight. On the 4th, Ryan caught her waiting outside his office with 2 cups of tea, one labeled with her name again. He took the cup, smiled slightly, and said, "Thanks, Laura." Her heart sank. Lena went home that night drenched and silent. Her roommate tried to cheer her up, but Lena just shook her head. "I've tried everything. I could tattoo my name on his forehead, and he'd still call me Lauren." But the truth? It wasn't just the name. It was the feeling that maybe she didn't matter enough to be remembered. The next morning, things got worse. Ryan's cousin, who worked at the university, discovered Lena's lie. She wasn't a student. She had snuck into the school. The cousin confronted her in front of staff, exposing the truth. Ryan was standing nearby, expression unreadable. Lena didn't even try to defend herself. She handed in a resignation letter she had secretly written, just in case, along with her temporary staff badge, and walked out of Westwood without. Looking back, she didn't cry, until she got caught in another rainstorm on the way home. This time there was no umbrella, no dry clothes, just her, soaked to the skin, stumbling into bed with a fever. Her roommate found her hours later, unconscious, burning up. Meanwhile, at the university, Ryan was trying to move on. He told himself she was just another distraction, another person trying to use him, but something didn't sit right. He opened his drawer and found the coffee mug with her name still faintly marked on the bottom. Lena. Suddenly it clicked. He had remembered. Without the app, without the signs, just her. The next day, Ryan was preparing to give an important lecture when his new assistant panicked. The PowerPoint file was corrupted. With no time to rebuild it, she called Lena as a last resort. Feverish, but determined, Lena grabbed her backup copy and rushed to the campus. She handed the USB to Ryan right before fainting in his arms. He caught her, just in time. Later, in the hospital, Ryan sat beside her bed, quietly watching her sleep. When she finally opened her eyes, groggy but awake, she asked him, "How'd the lecture go?" "I postponed it," he said, voice soft. "You were more important." Lena blinked, stunned. The next day, on a crowded city bus, she turned to him and said, "Ryan's, I like you." People turned. Phones came out. The whole bus started whispering. Ryan turned red, pulled her to the back of the bus and whispered, "I'm not ready to date." But she only smiled and said, "That's Okay, I'm not giving up, and she meant it. Lena meant it when she said she wouldn't give up. Even after Ryan told her he wasn't ready to date, she kept showing up, not to pressure him, but to prove she was serious. She brought him lunch on days he skipped meals, left post-it notes with jokes on his whiteboard, and made sure his dog had treats stashed all over campus. And little by little, Ryan softened. But just as their connection started to deepen, a shadow from Lena's past returned. Tina. Tina was once Lena's best friend in high school. They had started drawing comics together under a shared pen name. Their breakout story, Beyond the Clouds, had topped charts, but one day, Tina claimed all the credit, leaving Lena heartbroken and blacklisted in the industry. And now Tina was back, more successful than ever, and eyeing Lena's new comic for plagiarism. To make matters worse, Chris, Lena's assistant and longtime friend, had been reconnecting with Tina. At first, it was just business. Then something shifted. Chris had always been loyal to Lena, but watching her chase Ryan stirred something. In him, jealousy or heartbreak? One night, after seeing Lena and Ryan walking together, laughing like nothing else in the world mattered, Chris made a bold move. He took Tina out to dinner, hoping to clear his head. Instead, he kissed her. Tina, always one step ahead, leaned into it, but not before snapping a selfie and texting it to Lena. The next morning, Lena opened the message and froze. She wasn't sure what shocked her more, seeing her best friend kissing Chris, or realizing it hurt more than she expected. Later that day, she confronted Chris. "So that's it? You're with her now?" Chris tried to explain. "It's not about her. It's about you. I've been standing next to you for years, Lena. But you never looked at me the way you look at him." Before she could respond, Ryan showed up, holding flowers. He had planned to surprise her after finally deciding to give love a shot. What he walked into instead was chaos. Lena stood between two men, Tina smirking behind Chris like it was all a game. Ryan quietly turned and walked away without saying a word. Lena ran after him, calling his name. He stopped on the sidewalk, back turned. "You said you liked me," he said quietly, "but I can't tell if I'm just part of a story you're writing or something real." She grabbed his hand. "You are the story," she whispered. "You're the reason I believe in happy endings again." He looked at her, eyes searching hers, and in that moment, under a quiet New York sky, he kissed her, this time not by accident. But as fate would have it, Chris stood in the distance, watching them. His heart cracked silently as he turned and walked away. He didn't notice Tina following behind, and he had no idea that tomorrow everything would change again. Chris disappeared after that night. No calls, no texts, no late-night edits on the comic script. Lena tried to focus on her work, but her heart ached with guilt. She never meant to hurt him. He had been by her side for so long. But some people walk with you for a season, and others, they walk into your heart for good. That person, for her, was Ryan. Since their kiss, things had changed between them. He was still quiet, still complicated, but he showed up more. He brought her coffee in the mornings, made room for her in his routines, even let her walk his dog alone, something he never did before. And most importantly, he remembered her name. Every single time. Then came the big news. Lena's comic, inspired by their unlikely love story, had sold over 50,000 copies in just 2 weeks. It was the comeback she never thought she'd have. Her publisher arranged a signing event, press interviews, and hinted at a possible film deal. Fans flooded her page with messages asking the same question: is the story based on real life? First, Lena hesitated to answer. Ryan wasn't a public kind of guy, but before she could even decide, he made the choice for both of them. At the book signing, Ryan showed up unannounced, stepped onto the stage, and took the mic. "I'm the guy in the story," he said simply. "And yes, it's all true." The crowd erupted. Lena stood frozen, heart racing, tears brimming. He looked right at her, smiled, and added, "Best story I've ever been part of." But while Lena's life was falling into place, Chris's was unraveling. After that night, he had drifted toward Tina, not because he loved her, but because she was the only one who seemed to understand what he was feeling. Or so he thought. But Tina was still playing her games. She posted their kiss online, stirred up fan rumors, and tried to sabotage Lena's career once again. That's when Chris finally saw it for what it was. He confronted Tina, demanding she stop using his name for attention. "I believed in you," he said, "but all you believe in is winning." Then he left and didn't look back. Feeling remorse, Tina finally posted a public apology. She admitted to stealing credit for Beyond the Clouds years ago, clearing Lena's name once and for all. Lena saw the post and was stunned. Maybe people can change. Back at home, Ryan had a surprise of his own. He handed Lena an envelope with 2 papers inside. She opened it slowly and froze. Marriage license forms, he grinned. "It's the 21st century, why wait?" She laughed, half shocked, half in love. "Did you seriously trick me into getting married?" "I call it a plot twist," he said, pulling her close. They got married that afternoon, quietly, by the sea, with just their dog as witness. No drama, no press, just love. Sometimes the best stories don't need cliffhangers. They just need 2 people, one promise and a blank page they write together. What a roller coaster of love, right? From a random kiss in the park to an unforgettable romance filled with heartbreak, healing, and happily ever afters, Lena and Ryan's story reminds us that sometimes the best love stories are the messy, unexpected ones. We'd love to hear your thoughts. What part of their journey touched you the most? Did you relate to Lena, Ryan, or even Chris in any way? And most importantly, where in the world are you watching from? Drop a comment below and tell us what city or country you're tuning in from. We're building a global community of story lovers, and your voice matters. If you enjoyed this emotional ride, don't forget to like the video, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you won't miss tomorrow's next big story. We've got something extra special coming your way, and trust us, you'll want to be here for it. Thank you for spending your time with us. Now it's your turn. Sound off in the comments and let's talk about love, choices, and second chances.